Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Logan, and look, it's John.
Hello.
It's John, and we're not doing a commentary on Smallville tonight. Isn't that refreshing?
Yes, but we're also doing a plot that feels like something Smallville would rip off. So
It's actually shocking that that didn't straight up happen. I mean, there are episodes that might remind you a little bit of this, but not as straight up like somebody's biggest fan that's famous kidnaps them and makes them like write a book or something. Like that doesn't exactly happen anywhere in Smallville, but it's surprising that they ripped off Flatliners, but not this.
Yeah, and I was kind of glad that you were down to do this, just because this has been on my list forever. But it's also a movie I keep forgetting about.
Yeah,
so it's like a big like gap in my horror like viewing, but I always forget it exists.
So, of course, my luck would be that all of my horror friends who know this genre inside and out, one of the only big horror movies they haven't seen is my favorite horror movie. This keeps happening. Like, you hadn't seen this movie, Austin's not seen this movie. Like, all these horror people I know, nobody's seen Misery, even though it's in the top 5 Stephen King adaptations, and of the ones I've seen, in my mind, the best of them.
Oh, interesting. So now having seen it, okay, I have a weird relationship with Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah.
Whereas I consider King my favorite author, and I've read a lot of his big works. But there's a lot of the big adaptations that I haven't seen. Like I haven't seen, or I guess at this point I have now, but I typically prefer the books. This would make my top 5, but maybe it's going to be at the lower end of the list, maybe 4 or 5.
Oh, sure.
At this point.
Well, this is a real formative movie for me. I see this early high school, and it's, I want to say even before I had read any King. I think I saw this movie even before I read Firestarter, which was my first King novel.
Okay.
And it was formative for me for the whole genre because I wasn't a big horror guy, and I came to the genre, relatively late. So I think I had seen a couple of kind of like rougher slasher things before this. Like I had seen the first 2 Child's Play movies, I think, before I saw this.
Well, and I'm sure because you're a writer, this is something that you can relate to on that level.
Yeah, this is a movie that just resonates with me a lot, and I've always been interested in stories about fame and the effect it has on people's lives, and the difficult dynamics that people have with the rest of the world because they're too famous. That whole kind of situation has always been fascinating to me.
Yeah, I like that King goes to that like writer well a lot for his protagonists, because like you have this the main character of Salem's Lot is a writer.
No, he does it a lot. Yeah, even 11/22/63 is a
11/22/63, and then most famously The Shining.
That's a teacher, but also a writer, and then The Shining is a writer.
A teacher turned writer,
and some it goes the other way. Yeah, some people feel like he does it too often, and it can feel really kind of pretentious and stuck in your own little world to do that too often. I don't know why he pulls it off. I guess just in writing what he knows.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see complaining about that. For me, I look at like just looking at it. The 3 examples I listed: Salem's Lot, The Shining, and this. They're all writers, but all in very different situations, and he's saying something different with all of them. Like Jack Torrance,
and they don't feel like the same
one that I would say is a self-insert.
Well, none of them feel like the same character.
Yeah. Dan Since's The Dark Half is another example, and I haven't seen that one or read that one.
I think that is a writer, but yeah, I haven't actually read The Dark Tower. So I'm a real casual King fan. Like, there's the few novels that I really love, but haven't read in a long time. And then this movie, I've always been a gigantic fan of, but I've never actually finished the novel. I know more or less what happens in it and how it ends, and I've read the first, 150 pages maybe. That's one of those that I've started a few times and never got back to and finished. It's just really bleak and depressing.
It is.
And
And
what I like about the movie is that and I don't even want to say that not having completely finished it. I don't even want to say the movie is better than the book. I like the ways in which they're different things, and like how close that movie is to the book, but then thematically it's a little bit after some different things. And some of the big, because the book gets a lot bigger at the end. Some of the big kind of details in the third act are different, but like a lot of the character details and like background things and stuff are the same between them. But I feel like Misery is very much a movie, and the movie is very much a movie, and the book is very much a book, and it's one of the better examples to me of a book adapted to film and really understanding that medium.
yeah, so I didn't really remember the book when I went to reread it, and I'm glad I reread it because it was interesting comparing the movie and the book. Because the first thing that came to mind whenever I'm watching a Stephen King adaptation, the first thing that comes to mind for me is The Shining, because I've always said that I think The Shining is a very good movie. It's just not a very good adaptation of that book. This is a good movie and a good adaptation in that I don't feel like anyone in the movie is a completely different character to who they are in the book.
Right.
It's just certain things are different. Whereas when I'm watching The Shining, Jack Torrance in The Shining is not the book Jack Torrance.
Yeah, and I think we'll go ahead and get into the movie here in a second, but I also think it's just accessible in the right kinds of ways without being dumbed down.
Yeah.
Like, it's a better experience as a movie than it would be if it was just directly translated, because I think Paul Sheldon's somewhat more kind of redemptive arc in the movie is just a better film experience. If it was exactly like the book, you'd be watching a protagonist that was unconscious for most of it. Like, that's a problem. And again, it's just the book is so much about writing and about the place that King was in at the time that I like the ways in which the movie will I kind of homage that and call back to that, but it's not the exact same thing. Like in the book, Annie Wilkes is supposed to be like a metaphor for cocaine. She's not exactly that in the movie.
No, they tone her down a little bit, but I don't see that as a bad thing like I would with some other stuff.
No, it's still really effective.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was because I wasn't aware of this, I was looking it up. The idea came to him for this because he put out a fantasy novel that everybody liked,
right?
Or that like a lot of people didn't like,
and they wanted to pigeonhole
him to write horror.
Yeah, they wanted to pigeonhole him in that genre, and it's just like musicians that want to try different things but feel like they're stuck making the same popular pop song 100,000 times, and filmmakers that have to keep making the same movie, and all creatives that get any kind of popularity and admiration get this, even to a much tinier degree. I had this with Superhero Rewind, where there's a whole contingency of folks in our audience. That's all they ever wanted from me. And when I started trying to do a lot of other things, I disappointed some of those folks because they just wanted the same thing I was doing all along. And that can be such a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, people that like what you're doing want it to keep feeling fresh and not the same thing all the time. But what they really want is the feeling they got the first time they liked a thing that you made.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit more about Annie in the book when we're going into the movie, because something that resonated with me with this book on a reread that I wouldn't have gotten when I was younger reading it is just how much it represents what fandom kind of looks like today.
Yeah.
For a lot of online fandom. There's a really cool scene, and I'll talk. It's kind of in the movie, but he's telling her about like all these things he needs to write. He needs to have to write, and the creative process that he uses, and she just doesn't care. All she cares about is the end product.
Yep.
She doesn't care how it's made. And I was like, oh, this is like really interesting, not on a horror level, just on this is kind of the internet now.
Yeah, and it really holds up because we're seeing all of this stuff in kind of more of a macrocosm. Like, we've got we've got a magnifying glass up against it all the time.
Yeah.
Like something that struck me this time around. We should go ahead and start watching the movie. I'm just going to say everything I have to say before we even begin. But something that really struck me this time around, John, is the idea of fans, consumers who feel like they have some degree of ownership in your product. And that's a problem that feels a lot more magnified in this day and age with internet, especially Twitter culture. Of we don't like the direction your franchise is going, or the movies that you're making, or the shows or whatever. And so if we scream loud enough, we can enact that change and make it go a different direction. We have partial ownership in the thing you're making. And that's exactly what Annie Wilkes is, which is, well, you can't kill this character. I'm going to force you to resurrect her and to keep your series going. How many people on Twitter have attempted to do precisely this?
Yeah. One thing that I will complain about this movie, and maybe it'll change my mind when I watch it again because I've only seen this once, is I don't think I'm in Paul's head enough in the movie. In the book, he goes into meticulous detail about his relationship with that character and why he ends it, and I don't think we talk about that enough in the movie. Whereas the reason in the book that he kills her is he's come to hate that character, and he's almost ashamed that that's what's made him famous.
Right.
And I thought that was a really interesting take.
It's done really economically in the movie, but I think that point is driven home well enough at the beginning. But we'll talk about it as we get into it.
For sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and get into the movie. If you want to watch it along with us, get it to timestamp 0. It is currently on Max if you're in the States and you don't have a physical copy. But if you've got this on DVD or Blu-ray, however you want to watch it, make sure to get it to timestamp 0. Get ready to press play when we say now. Thanks a lot for joining us. If you're watching, we're starting real late tonight, so we appreciate you hanging out with us on a Friday. If you're watching this after the fact, we appreciate that as well, and we'll try to interact with you some as we go along. Everybody, please press play right now. So I was talking
just while it's on the opening logo, I'm going to swap out my headset battery.
Oh, sure. I was talking to Austin about this the other day, and again, he's not seen this movie yet, which is kind of surprising to me, but hopefully he does that soon. I think he'd like it a lot. But we were just looking at the Castle Rock logo, and Austin was saying he's kind of surprised this hasn't been remade yet.
Okay.
And we have had a prequel to this of sorts, which I've not seen yet. But the second season of the show Castle Rock on Hulu is the background of Annie Wilkes, and I forgot they did that. And I would be kind of curious to go and look at that and see what they did with it.
Yeah, I'm super curious about that because I watched season 1 and I really liked it. Just because I'd never seen anything like it where it's not a King adaptation. It's we're going to take a bunch of stuff from King and kind of mishmash it.
Yeah, it's like starting with the shared universe concept.
Yeah, which if there's anything you can do that with, it is King.
Oh yeah, it's a great idea. It's too bad it didn't last longer.
Yeah,
like maybe they got enough done in the first 2 seasons. I don't know, but I'm sure they expected they'd get more.
Yeah. No, because there's characters in that they don't do anything with. Like Jane Levy plays Jackie Torrance, who's like the niece of Jack Torrance.
Oh,
and they never do anything with her.
Robert says, as a fan, there's a difference between voicing your opinions and constructive criticism and telling creatives they should make the thing you want. And we had a comment right before that from One Bridge 11, which isn't a name I recognize, who says, more fan bashing, give me a break. Obviously, I'm a fan of a lot of things also. There is, you can take anything too far, and it's just not true that I mean there's a balance to everything, but it's just not true that fans are necessarily owed anything when a creative makes things that they really like. Like, it sucks when it doesn't go where you wanted it to, or you feel like it's going against its initial ideas and precepts or whatever. But at the end of the day, it is self-expression of an artist or of a number of artists, and they get to decide what happens with it. And like constructive feedback is good, and they should listen to people that have good ideas about the thing and being effective in the way they want it to be. But just because I like your thing doesn't make me think that I'm a co-writer of it, and that's when you're taking it too far.
Yeah.
I'll now get off my soapbox about that.
This is an interesting way to start the movie, just because we do get to see like the actually see the crash, whereas the book obviously starts after.
Yeah, and I'm a little fuzzy on why he's leaving in the movie at the time he is versus in the book. Because in the book, he just gets drunk and decides he's going to go ahead and drive back when he was originally supposed to take a plane. And here, all we're told, and he's clearly not inebriated when he's driving here. And all he tells us in this is he wasn't paying attention to the news and he didn't know that there was going to be a storm. So, like, right away, we're trying to make this guy even more sympathetic to the audience than he was in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Where he doesn't seem to be paying for anything here except for, his massive fame and for having the audacity to want to have a creative life beyond this popular, least common denominator character that made him famous.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's definitely a better idea for a film versus where in the book here he kind of grown to hate that character and be ashamed of it almost.
I think that is again still baked into this. Maybe not to the degree that he has that in the book, but I think it's pretty clear from this scene here with his publisher that he's really ready to be done with this character, and that's why he's killed her.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? You're right. I forgot about this scene.
Yeah, this is a very, very important scene because it's one of the only times where we actually get to listen to Paul Sheldon talk about his feelings on this character in the series, not through the lens of having to deal with Annie Wilkes, who he has to, try to manipulate. So, like, everything both of those characters say to each other, not everything, but a lot of it is unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
If I hadn't gotten rid of her now, I'd have ended up writing her forever. I mean, I don't know that you need much more than that.
Yeah. Dan's Den said that this is the peak of Rob Reiner, one of the most legendary mainstream runs a filmmaker has ever had. And then Robert Wild just sent in a $2 super chat from the writer and director of The Princess Bride, which I also have never seen.
Yeah, that's a great movie. It's fun. I got really sick of it very quickly, and that's one of those movies I don't go back to because I could not be more done with people quoting that. I have that with a few things, I must admit, where like I don't ever have to see Monty Python and the Holy Grail ever again.
Yeah, I saw that once and I liked it, but I don't know if I'll ever go back to it.
I was done in high school with people quoting that movie. I also like that we don't have a series of flashbacks in this. Like, it's so economical about its exposition. I love we talked over it, but I love the way it opens with just the real quick cuts to all of the things that he does in his ritual when he finishes a book. And it kind of sticks with you. Like when Annie Wilkes brings that up again later, on even a first viewing, I think you might remember that you saw him do all those things. And it's nicely bookended when we have the real kind of twisted version of it later.
Yeah, I like that they set that up here because that at least like the cigarette thing is not really set up in the book from what I remember. He brings it up at the end and she's like repulsed by it because it's a nasty habit.
Yeah, and again, both of them are made more sympathetic in the movie, but she's still horrible. So, like, I don't think they go so far in humanizing her that you don't still hate her the way you're supposed to. But she's, like, almost inhuman in the book the way she's described.
Yeah, they play up the like childlikeness of her in the movie,
Yeah, which I
which
like a
I
lot.
don't mind. I'm kind of glad they do that. I don't need to see the like dirty mop water.
Yeah, absolutely. Originally, that role was offered to Bette Midler, who turned it down and then massively regretted it later, particularly when uh, she won the Oscar for this.
Yeah, and I don't think I've seen this actress in anything else that's coming to mind, but
Oh,
she's
really?
really good at
You have no
this.
experience with Kathy Bates?
I don't think so. At least like she.
So she was a
Now watch, I'm gonna
relative
say that, and then I'm gonna pull up her like
she was
filmography and be
actually a
like, oh, I've
relative
seen that.
unknown when she got this part. I grew up with Kathy Bates and all kinds of stuff. My mom was a big fan of Fried Green Tomatoes, which unfortunately does not hold up at all. Nobody go back and watch that.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
But some of that's the little bit of age difference that you and I have. I think she was in a lot of movies when I was growing up.
Yeah, I want to see that. She's in another King adaptation. I started the book, but I never finished it. Dolores Claiborne or something.
Oh, is she? I didn't know that. Yeah, I've never seen that either.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I saw Titanic like once, but I was a little kid and I was like, this is boring.
And I forgot she was in that, honestly. But and now she's the new Matlock, which is hilarious.
Yeah, I remember you describing that on I think it was a Captain Logan show because I didn't even know they brought that back.
Yeah, yeah, it's very odd the way they did that. I wish the writing was better. I couldn't get into that enough to watch another episode, but the idea of it being in a world where Matlock exists as a TV show and she just kind of runs with that idea is kind of fun. I think you get to do that once.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. We're coming at this differently because we each looked at different material before the other. I think so. Like, um, these are both like really good ways to tell this story slightly differently. So I imagine that anybody that really enjoys this material in either form would likely prefer the version they first saw it in. But what I like about the movie, as opposed to the book, which once again I have not ever finished, is I like that there is a little bit of pretense at the beginning where there's plenty of suspense building where like you don't trust this woman from the beginning. I
Hmm.
like at no point does she feel like a full-on savior. Like right away we're like, okay, why doesn't she take him to a hospital? It's pretty clear that she's got to be lying about stuff from the beginning. Like I don't trust her when she says the phones are out. I don't trust her when she says that the roads are totally out. Like there's something off about the way she interacts with people and with she always feels like she's hiding something. But there is this bit of pretense and this kind of tete-a-tete, this kind of dance that both of these characters do with each other throughout the movie, but particularly in the first act, where I like that there's this kind of switch moment where up to the point really where she makes Paul burn his novel, there's a chance, right? Or is it there? Or is it? No, maybe it's even before. Up until the point where she says, "Nobody's coming for you." Like there is the potential that she's just not all there upstairs, but her heart is kind of in the right place. And
Hmm.
if you've not read the book, you're kind of wondering through the whole first act, like what exactly are this woman's intentions, and if you're really with Paul, you're hoping that in the back of your mind that everything is somehow on the up and up here. And I like that continues to deteriorate throughout the movie. And in the book, it's just clear from the very beginning what is happening. And for
Hmm.
for the sake of a movie, it is kind of fun wondering just how far this is going to go. I also really like the added subplot with the sheriff, and I like his relationship with his wife. And it's refreshing that they're a couple that works well together, and they're that old that typical like old bickering married couple, but they have a really specific kind of unique dynamic that I like a lot. and I think that he kind of livens the movie up a little bit.
Yeah. Real quick, Dansden and Robert Wilder both saying that Dolores Claiborne is great because it's more of like a drama that got unfairly compared to this, unfortunately.
Oh yes, Robert Wilder, you're right.
$2 super chat. Farnsworth is great, and it's a straight story.
Right. I was just about to read that.
But
let me talk about that for a second.
On the added subplot, it's not bad, and like it works for the movie. So like it's more of just that's different, so it's kind of weird. What I like in the book is that you never leave the reader's point of view. So you're kind of like, oh, is somebody going to come? Is it kind of hopeless? So that it's a different vibe in the movie, which isn't bad. I don't think any of the changes for this movie are bad. They're just more interesting.
Yeah, John, just real quick, I was going to say, so I had to talk about the Straight Story a couple years ago on the request, and I forgot that was that same actor. Yeah, he's amazing in that.
Okay.
And
I don't think I know what that is.
That is a movie based on a true story about an old man who drives a ride-on tractor across America. And it sounds like a really dull premise, but it's fascinating.
Is that the David Lynch movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great. And that actor was actually dying as he was making it, which makes the whole thing even more interesting. And so, like, he had like skin issues and stuff that they just straight up show in the movie that are not even makeup jobs. Like, it was almost, I don't want to say accidentally meta, but like just, you know, or not meta like method, but like it just had to be the way they made it. And it was fascinating. But yeah, that's one of my favorite movies that I've covered on that show. And one of the only ones Austin missed, unfortunately. I had to do that one on my own.
So kind of funny because we were talking about like King does a lot of authors. One thing that is funny about this is it is yet another author stuck in a snowstorm.
Yep. But yeah, like I said earlier, I think it was a really smart choice to not try to just straight up tackle this like in the book, because I think it would have felt too kind of oppressive and maybe daunting to try to stay from his perspective the whole movie. Like I can almost see that done, John, like in like anime style, where you're just in his head constantly and he's narrating the whole movie. Like that's about the only way you could do that. And if you're gonna do it with the kind of Western sensibilities of film at the time, this is kind of the only way to handle it. And I also like, just for the sake of a movie, that he's allowed to be a little bit more proactive. And Khan said that even with having more to do than he would have if they did it more straight like the novel, it was still difficult playing a character that was always reacting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I the narration would have been nice, but you're right. Like for the sensibilities of the time, I think more so I would have liked if we never left the house. Like even if we're just focused on misery more, or not misery, Annie more. But like I said, this what they do isn't bad, because I do like the sheriff and I do like the stuff building up to the eventual rescue. And like the Misery book is good, but it's not. I wouldn't call it a top 5 King novel. So like I'm not as like hyper analyzing like, oh, this is different, this is different. You know what I mean? Like something like The Shining, where that is one of my favorite novels. So I'm a little more disappointed with the changes to a film format. This, I'm like, yeah, this is different, but it's still cool.
Libby is a girl's name. I don't know why that guy's name is Libby. I think one of the reasons the sheriff subplot is there, beyond just making the movie a little bit more entertaining for an audience and giving us another human perspective, is, and making it a little bit of a detective story, which, I mean, like, we already know what's going on, but I guess for whatever reason that just kind of works for me, like watching this guy try to piece it together and figure out what we know already. Like sometimes I hate that, where it's like, yeah, I already know this guy's got to catch up, but I think the building up the suspense to his eventual death is probably why that works. Because it really hurts my feelings when he dies, and I wish that doesn't happen. But like, it's really effective.
So
Because they make me
I'm
like that guy
glad they
so
keep this
much
here.
that it sucks when that happens.
I like the way they play this out because he's talking about everybody talks like that where he comes from, but she can't see past her own like sensibilities.
Also, no one in the history of the world before her has ever said Christly or Christing. Yeah, give me some of that Christing money. I like the implied like baggage and trauma with childhood with her without coming right out and really giving us any of that. Like there's so much without reading the novel that you could guess about why she is the way she is, that you don't even need exposition about it. There's a lot you can kind of piece together.
The novel is kind of like that too. The only real explanation is just that she has like depressive mood swings, which is in the movie, which I do appreciate.
Right, like is that chemical or does that just come from childhood trauma? Is it some mix of both? Like I like that that's kind of a mystery. But she's so kind of Quakerish in her in her beliefs and her worldview, that she had to have had, real religious upbringing. It was probably really strict. She was probably told exactly how she was going to be and what she was going to do. Like you can kind of piece that stuff together.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just me having read a lot, like a bunch of King. That's typical King, like religious zealot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Carrie.
Carrie's mom.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. But what I started to say earlier is part of the reason that I think the sheriff character is here is just to give us some exposition that would be otherwise difficult to give us without a third-person narrator.
For sure, yeah.
So like he tells us about what car Sheldon was driving. And
have you seen Dr. Sleep?
I still haven't.
I like that movie a lot, but I like Flanagan.
So I watched this with my son Jason last night, who I had shown this to before, and he really likes this movie. And he wanted to be here with us for this, but it was too late, and he's got to get up early in the morning. But he thought it was really funny on another viewing that the sheriff gets, just because of the way it's shot, that he gets so close to the car but can't find it. And Jason's like, just look a little farther. It's right there. Like, you look at the framing of it. It's like, how did you miss that? And then I think it's really funny when he's in the helicopter later, because he's got to be thinking, like, crap, I was right there. I was, like, inches from it.
Did Jason like it overall?
Oh, like I said, he begged me to watch it with him, or he begged to watch it with me because he had seen it a year or two ago. I showed it to him and he really liked it.
Oh, sorry, I thought he was like begging you to show it for the first time. I didn't miss.
Yeah, no, maybe I didn't make that clear, but no, he likes this movie a lot already. He was bummed that he couldn't make it for the commentary.
Okay, yeah, it's a shame.
See, it's right there.
Yeah, it's right there.
But from that angle, you can see how he doesn't actually notice the tire.
Yeah.
Because it's only poking out from our side. But I like that this is a really competent sheriff who doesn't have very much work very often. So at first you might think that he's going to be played kind of incompetent, doesn't know what he's doing. But he's played as, real smart and knows his stuff, and he's been at this a long time. I love that shot when Annie Wilkes passes him in her car, because at first we're like, why are we shooting it like this? Why is the camera moving so much? And then it starts to turn and you go, oh, we're in a car. Okay. And then you see her. Oh, it's her. It's just kind of a nice reveal.
Robert Wild said Jay Cann is also fantastic in this. He's a bit overshadowed by Kathy Bates, but they're both wonderful. So that was my big thing watching this. As much as I like Kathy Bates as Annie, I really like James Caan as Paul. In fact, I think I like we talked about. It's kind of softened a little bit for a cinematic take, but I think I like the movie version better than the book version, just because the book version is kind of mean spirited at times.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really effective for what King is after in that book. So I'm not going to complain that the book is too cynical or mean spirited. Like, that's the point. It's such a cathartic exercise for him, which usually I would say if you're too close to a subject, maybe you shouldn't write about it. And I think that's just such a specific moment in time for that guy to get that crystallized in such a good narrative is actually kind of a treat for his audience, which is ironic because it's almost written kind of against his fans or some of his fans. Because again, he wrote a fantasy novel and people were upset that he was, getting out of his lane. So he writes a book about how that happens to another writer, and with every writer's kind of worst nightmare.
Yeah,
with somebody obsessed with them coming after them like this.
Josh Perry says, I've seen this movie. It's a good one. Thank you for letting me join you guys online. I mean, welcome in. Remember books?
Yeah, I was going to say, this story in both mediums holds up great. But one of the things that hilariously dates it now or makes things just feel kind of depressing now is that you have kind of a faux intellectual with Annie Wilkes who is obsessed with quote-unquote literature, but she's real surface level about everything. I like all the little details in what she does in the way she talks in her personal life. So she's the only thing she watches on TV is game shows, which is kind of offensive to me because I like game shows and I don't think of myself as a faux intellectual or an anti-intellectual. But it gives me pause that a character like this, all she watches is game shows. And she reads this kind of trashy throwaway fiction, or at least that's how Paul Sheldon looks at it. And again, he's kind of like a pop group that would rather be playing blues or something. And so the idea is during this period, most people still read, or at least a lot of people read, but it didn't make them smart or intelligent just because they were reading. They would find things that were relatively passive experiences that they didn't have to think about too much, where there wasn't a great deal of subtext, not very much going on beneath the surface. Trashy romance novels, and this kind of thing, historical fiction that's not really.
The pig thing is really fun.
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking over the scene.
No, yeah, no, I think that's interesting,
and now just those people don't read anymore. That's really what I'm getting at. Is those people would be watching those are people that just sit around and watch Netflix all day now.
Yeah. Robert Wilde, John, would you say the actors match the characters are described in the book? Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a mental image of Paul just because the book is told from his perspective. But no, I forgot her name already. The actress playing Annie is pretty perfect.
It's Kathy Bates, John.
Yes, sorry, I should remember that. Kathy's my mom's name. Then Robert also said this is a top 5 King adaptation. Yeah, like I said, this might make my top 5, but it would be at this point probably number 4 or 5. If you haven't seen The Dead Zone, you should, because it's awesome.
Yeah, I've never seen that, and there's, I'm sure, lots of King books I've still not, or King movies I've still never seen. But I don't know, I'm biased because again, this was really formative to me, and I've always appreciated the subject matter. But I don't know, Carrie is probably second in my mind. I like
Carrie a lot.
And then it's probably The Shining after that.
All right, Cap, we're going to do all of the Stephen King adaptations.
Oh, God. I draw the line at Dark Tower. I'm not watching that again. You can't make me do it, John.
Yeah, you know, I haven't seen that because I've read the books and I saw they turned it into like a 90-minute movie. I was like, nope.
Yeah. No, it's insane how condensed that is, and how young adult it watches. It
You
watches
know they're,
like a YA adaptation.
but I will say it's okay because Mike Flanagan is making that into a show for Amazon, and I can't wait.
Well, that's definitely what they should be doing.
Yeah, we got to show up Doctor Sleep, the Dead Zone. I'm partial to the '90s, the Stand miniseries.
So, John, where I kind of disagree with you a little bit in taking this from book to movie is I like so where you say we're not in his head as much, and that makes it not as effective. But I do like all of the places where we're constantly cutting back to his reactions, where like you could really imagine what he's thinking in a lot of those moments, and deliberately we're constantly doing that. Like nearly every scene with the two of them ends with a different reaction from him laying in that bed.
Okay, I love this because this is like this is scary.
No, it really is. The only reason she doesn't hit him there is the movie would be over. No, I'm kidding. I like all the first-person perspectives between the two of them. You could almost shoot the entire movie that way. Like when she's looming down and you're just imagining yourself where he is. Yeah, that's actually kind of terrifying.
Somebody earlier in the comments was talking about like you could remake this, people would be upset. This this doesn't need to be remade, and the other reason I bring this up is because we just had the third remake of Salem's Lot.
Yeah,
and it's the worst one. Remake the ones that didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, but of course we just go to
fine.
brand recognition. It's just all about name recognition, John.
We've got
why
like 3 Carrie remakes now, 3 Salem's Lots.
Yeah, and inevitably this will probably end up getting remade at some point, really terribly. Pet Sematary got one.
That Pet Sematary remake is like one of the worst things.
Is it really?
I hate it. Like the original movie is just the book condensed into a 90-minute movie, but like that's at least watchable.
And like, yes, you can always take a movie that took a lot of creative license or even just took some and make it not a remake of the movie, but do a new adaptation that goes very much in its own way. Like the TV movie for The Shining was not a bad idea. It's just not real well written or well acted, which is unfortunate because King himself wrote that screenplay.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually own that on Blu-ray. Scream Factory put out a Blu-ray for it.
That's hilarious.
I've always been one that said you can remake The Shining, that's fine. We need a better adaptation. But then Midnight Mass.
This is
Dr.
really
Sleep
visceral here. When he drops out of that bed, like you feel that.
Yes, and no, he like looks in pain. But Dr. Sleep came out, and it's kind of a perfect hybrid between adapting Dr. Sleep and adapting Shining. So now I've gotten that adaptation that I don't need another one.
Also, you gotta appreciate the intricate makeup job done on his legs.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's ridiculous how realistic that looks. And they know it too, because when he's first in that bed and she pulls the covers up, John, they established the hell out of that makeup job. But yeah, one of the reasons that this has always been my favorite horror movie is I think it remains relatively genuinely scary.
Yeah, and I've never really seen. I've only seen maybe one movie that actually scared me.
I guess I mean more on like an intellectual level. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I don't mean like I was scared to the point where like I had to turn it off or like it gave me nightmares or whatever. But just like in the moment while I'm watching it, I'm with this guy and she bothers me.
No, that's fair.
You
But
know,
I mean,
I'm just saying, like, it's
you know me. My
effective
favorite is
horror,
a
and it
movie where a guy
remains.
gets a chainsaw for a hand that fights demons.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the reason that I don't know why you would want to make this again, because I'm not sure how you could improve on it. Like, even if you made it closer, even if you took all the events in the book that don't happen in this, and you put those all in a movie, I don't know that you could do it much more effectively. And it would also be more likely to feel real kind of corny or too over the top. There's stuff that happens toward the end of that book that I think is a lot more effective in prose than would likely to be in a movie. Like, I'm glad that they cut the like running over a guy with a lawnmower. That's just maybe too far for this material. Like, if that was in this movie, I don't think that works.
After M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, you can't do that.
And then, like, she goes after him with a chainsaw. Like, I'm kind of glad none of that's in this.
Yeah. No, I don't really need a remake of this. At this point, I would like to see a new Pet Sematary, because you can improve that material. But as long as Paramount owns the rights, which I assume they still do, because I don't know if you know this, but they put out a crappy prequel on Paramount Plus last year.
Oh yeah,
that's their thing now. Did you know that we got a Rosemary's Baby prequel?
God,
and it is as big a waste of time as you can imagine.
Yeah, well, and then you had that Silence of the Lambs prequel without Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, that seems to be the next trend that we're getting is just prequels. Do you guys like Cujo? I only saw it once. And I thought it was kind of boring.
I've never seen that. And prequels before there's any story at all to tell.
Yeah, like the problem with that Rosemary's Baby one is nothing can happen because the actual story hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, prequels that, in order to be effective, you would always have to put them in a different genre, and we're not going to do that. I need a remake for 11/22/63 because that is one of the most disappointing and offensive things I've ever seen.
And I haven't seen that.
Don't do it.
We'll do it live, Cap.
Oh, I don't want to do it. It's just too much about the actual conspiracy. That's all in the background. That's not what that book's about.
Yeah. No, that's my big problem with a lot of King adaptations is they tend to focus on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I am not a big fan of the Christine movie because I think it's too it cuts down too much of the like human stuff in favor of horror, which I probably should like. But what I like about King is it is people you can relate to going through terrifying things.
Yeah, no, it's literary fiction in its way most of the time. And I think one of the reasons I like this movie as much as I do is because it retains that.
That's what I really like about Flanagan is he comes from those same kind of sensibilities, and that shows in a lot of his movies and miniseries.
Yeah.
So this is a scene where I feel really bad for Paul in the book. In the movie, here in a minute, it's going to get kind of goofy, and it makes me laugh.
What's goofy about it?
She doesn't seem to realize setting fire to things next to the curtains is a bad idea. Matthew Clark, Cap, what do you hate more, Rob Zombie's Halloween or Joker Fallen? What stupid title? I
don't know. Neither of those things are good.
Rob Zombie's Halloween isn't that bad.
Probably edges it out slightly. Everyone wants to talk about anything
but Halloween apologist.
Why are we talking about everything but this movie?
I'm just reading the chat.
So I know this is handled a little bit differently in the book because she has him medicated the whole time. The biggest like through line difference in where I say, and I wanted to know what your opinion is on this, John. The biggest kind of through line difference in where I say thematically it's kind of different is
what are you doing right now?
So I was going to talk about that. So in the book, the idea is she's been getting him addicted to painkillers,
Yeah.
And that does not happen in the movie. She thinks and it is the same drug, so she's giving him Novril in both versions. But in this, he's hiding them so that he can use them on her later, and so that he keeps his faculties intact. And she was supposed to be like I said earlier, a stand-in for cocaine. Because that's what Stephen King was experiencing, which is why I think in the book at the end he actually has another copy, or like is able to save the real copy of Misery's Return and publish it, which doesn't happen in this. And I think the reason for that in the book is because like Stephen King felt like he needed cocaine to get through these experiences of writing novels, so he has a product at the end. And in this, she's not cocaine, so there is no product at the end. And I was just wondering, John, how you felt about that change and which of those you preferred.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring it up at the end. Because in the book, it's that he pretends to burn Misery, the new Misery book, but he actually keeps it and publishes it, and it's like a big hit.
Right. And
I'm not sure what King is saying with that is, oh, it's okay to embrace. Is he saying, like, is it okay to embrace, like, what you're good at and famous for? And I'm a little more confused with this, where he publishes a book that's fueled by his trauma writing that here. So like, what is his like takeaway from all this? I'm not sure what it is at the end of the day in the movie or in the book.
This is very clearly filmed on a soundstage. We can dissect that for a second. In this, I think the idea is, sorry, I'm distracted.
Cap's like, I'm trying to watch the movie.
Look, I'm watching a film. Why do I have to analyze this movie I'm watching? No, I think the idea is at the end he's just like trying to heal, and it's a cathartic experience to write something that is not misery, and so he's getting what he wanted at the end of the day, but at the cost of this terrible trauma that he's still 18 months later not remotely past, because he's still seeing her everywhere. And I think both versions are doing kind of a bittersweet ending, or kind of like what appears at first to be a happy ending, but then it's a little bit twisted too, where like he's survived this. And he doesn't even have to be an amputee in this version. He's survived this. He gets to write something else, but the thing he gets to write is about this experience. So, like, is that really better? In the book, I think the idea is he gets even more famous over more misery. That sells even better because everybody knows that it came from this experience. So he's getting rewarded for it by getting even more of what he was trying to get away from by killing her in the first place.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I love either ending over the other.
King is worried that if he keeps writing more horror, he's just going to dig himself further and further, into a grave. But he kicked the addiction. Like that's the positive part of it. And so in the book, killing her is getting rid of that addiction. And then I guess the question is, can you, and this is the question mark that neither thing really answers, and this movie is not about addiction. But that's the thing, is that it's a really good adaptation that's not about the same things.
Mm-hmm. And I think that might be where I prefer the book a little bit more, because
sure,
I can see Stephen King in the writer.
Yeah. No, and that I completely understand. Like I kind of marvel at how well this holds together as a story, while getting rid of the entire point.
Although I do question how he's not in agony with not taking those pain pills, with how messed up his legs are.
Yeah. I'm not sure I buy that either. But yeah, I started to say something. I'm trying to remember what it was. That he I can't remember what it was.
Teddy sent
I'll
in a
think of it.
4.99 super chat. She's not cocaine, and media analysis is getting weird.
Yes, she is.
Um, have you actually read The Shining? I know you said you haven't read a lot of King.
Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. They say she's not Cocaine Man. She is. She is Cocaine Man. But no, I mean, like, I I used to watch this movie very differently before I understood what King was getting at with his novel. Because if you're not familiar with it, and you don't know anything about Stephen King, that subtext is completely lost, and it kind of is anyway. Again, because he's not addicted to anything in this. But
Yeah.
it's also interesting. Like, this is almost more of like a traditional descent into hell and coming out the other side sort of story. And like both of them do that, but with this, it's almost like the reward he gets at the end is survival for his skills. So what you're watching is a man, a good writer who writes his way out of a problem, and it's not about good writing. It's about like economic writing. It's about using your I what I'm your resources, right? It's about resourcefulness. And so he does the same thing that he does in life to survive, where he again gets a really good paycheck writing this thing that he doesn't even really like and believe in, but he knows what sells. And so in order to survive in this, he does what he knows will sell to her, and he's able to stave off her murder of him by writing what she wants. And then by the end, he burns the whole thing, and his catharsis for that is then getting her back and killing her in self-defense, certainly. But he obviously gets off on that to some degree, and who wouldn't really? And
The more we talk
I think it's
about the
interesting
book,
that he doesn't save the manuscript, because the only reason it exists is as his weapon to get out of this. And I think that's why the story works despite losing the cocaine metaphor.
yeah. It's funny. The more we talk about the book, the more it's kind of interesting. I'm starting to see it as kind of a companion piece to the Shining novel, because that is also about King's addictions at the time. And in a perfect world where we got like off the page adaptations of both of those, that would be an interesting double feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I also don't want to get too personal, but one of the reasons this movie resonates with me is because there are potentially historical figures in my own life going back to early childhood that this woman reminds me of.
Oh, I meant to ask, by the way, Kev, because you are a writer and have written books. So that manuscript burning scene where she's forced to write, or where he's forced to burn what is clearly a passion project,
Yeah.
does that just like hit you in a place?
Yes. No, that's always really bothered me. And I love the way he plays it too. Like, his bluff is really good. Where he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We've got plenty of copies. They're already running it through printers right now," and she knows that's not true and doesn't buy it. And just kind of the lump in his throat, I feel real hard when he has to burn it. That's what I meant to say earlier, John. Is that scene in the movie or in the book? Sorry, plays differently because he's that's all real visceral. That scene plays really differently in the book because of the addiction, the way she makes him burn that. In this, it seems, because I'm just remembering this. So in the book, the idea is he has to burn it in order to get more of that drug.
Pills. Yeah.
She has him so addicted to that, and one of the reasons that he keeps getting out and going around the house is to try to find more pills.
Yes.
In the book. And so he burns the manuscript because it's the only way he can get more of that, and he relies on her. And in the movie, he burns it because this is why John, she's spilling the lighter fluid all over him, is she's without coming out and saying it, threatening him. If he doesn't do what she tells him to, he's afraid she's going to set him on fire.
Okay, I wondered if that was what it was, because that scene also plays her as really clumsy, so I wasn't sure.
I think she does a lot of clumsy things on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get there, I'll get ahead of myself for a second. I was going to ask you if you think in the dinner scene she knocks the wine over on purpose, because I think it plays completely ambiguously, and I think it works either way.
See, I thought it was just like when I watched it, I thought it was just an accident, but now you've got me like rethinking it.
Because she does stuff like that earlier.
Yeah. Matthew Bass wants to know, are you guys planning on doing any other horror commentaries? I mean, if we have time, I'd be down.
I know John always wants to do horror stuff. I don't feel like I have a lot. It's not my genre, and I don't feel like I have a lot to add with this kind of stuff. And even with this movie, John's read the book more recently, and he knows a lot more King than me. For me, it's kind of more just, I really like this movie.
One thing that I find really funny in the book, I wish we had kept here, I'm getting a little ahead of myself too, is we have that scene later where she complains about continuity not being fair.
Yes.
In the book, he comes up with the most absurd reason. It's like a bee sting that makes her appear dead or whatever.
That's in
this.
She
doesn't care because it tracks.
No, that's in this.
Oh, okay. I love that it wasn't fair speech. It's supposed to be scary, but it just made me laugh.
No, that is kind of funny. Well, that's the thing is, there are places where this movie is really walking on a knife's edge between horror and comedy, and it never feels too corny or goofy to me, even a lot of years later. Even when it's scary to him but funny to the audience, it still plays fine to me.
For sure.
I like that it's a scary movie that doesn't take itself too seriously.
I like this that like the phone is hollowed out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and that suggests that she is not just nuts, but just like smarter than we thought she was. So she's not an intellectual, but she's street smart.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the book takes that to another level. In the movie, she catches him because of one of the statues. But in the book,
and that feels pretty typical film stuff, right? Like, oh, you've got that one statue that's always turned to, and maybe she's OCD enough to catch that. I wasn't sure that he wouldn't be paying close enough attention to detail to not make sure to put it back the way it was. But maybe he didn't see it when he knocked it. Yeah, he's not looking at it. No, maybe this does work okay. He didn't even see which way. But then again, everything else on that table is facing the
penguin.
But no, I know. But everything else on that table is facing the exact same direction.
Oh yeah.
Why would you put it back facing the other way of the rest of it? I just would think.
No, it's sloppy.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be that sloppy.
Well, that's what I like in the book is she sets like traps, like little paper clips and stuff that she can tell has been messed with, and that's how she knows.
Yep. I also love that somebody in the art department had to design every single one of those novel covers. Or at least spines. You got to wonder if there are covers for all those books because we just see the spines of them. Like, I'd love to know what all those props actually look like.
I have that with, there's a procedural show I like a lot with Nathan Fillion, Castle.
I've always wanted to watch that. I've never seen it.
It starts out really strong, where he's a writer and they have to create like books for him.
Yeah, no,
and I think they actually like legitimately published a few books under his character's name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
I'd have
cool.
to look into it again. It's been a while. Yeah.
So he finds the drugs and he doesn't take them because he's not addicted to them.
Well, take some of them.
Yeah, I guess he does take some, but there's a whole bunch.
But it's to stuff it in or put it in the.
Well, I guess you wouldn't take too much of it, even if you were addicted, or she would know.
Yeah, yeah. So like, I'm with you that this works and like this is a good adaptation, but it does kind of continue that kind of frustration I have where we've got a lot of what I think makes King's stories really good. Um, Even though, like I said, this is definitely a top 5 adaptation.
I mean, just based on performances, if nothing else.
Yeah,
But I also just really like the way it's shot. There's a lot. One of the reasons I find this movie kind of timeless too is it's real Hitchcock in the way it's shot.
I can see that. No, this is stressful.
There's a lot of great intercutting. I love when we get to the end of this scene and he is trying to get uh he's trying to get the room locked, and we cut back and forth between both of them locking and unlocking doors.
That's a classic Hitchcock.
Yeah. And then when you get to the end of the movie, there or I guess into the third act anyway. I like that montage, where we cut between the two of them, and then back to the sheriff for a minute, even.
One of the things I find interesting with movies like
All,
this is
all reading.
Is the set design, because it's such a like time capsule of when it came out.
Yeah, and I can totally see your point from earlier about kind of wanting the whole movie to take place in the one room, because I'm a big sucker for one room dramas, and this is almost one.
Yeah.
But I think, again, there's just a lot of economy to going to that sheriff. And I think it's also probably intentionally some relief for the audience, whether you think it needs that or not.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the relief of for the audience. I think that just depends on who you are. Like I can see the argument of it's a horror movie, like the relief should be at the end, but I can also see being like, well, you need that like to mix it up for a film. Matthew Bass, I highly suggest a blind commentary on Trick or Treat. It's a perfect Halloween movie. That is a good movie.
Yeah, sometimes the false sense of security is nice when you're cutting back to, some levity and scenes that remind you that there's a real regular world out there. But I can see the argument for both, and I don't think either direction, even for this movie, was necessarily wrong. I still think the main reason that sheriff is here is just to give us exposition we couldn't get otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, with the like the things that are different, most of them are more just like, huh, that's different.
Okay, so now I find myself questioning what is actually really going on with the pills, because we'll see him continually not take them, or at least not take them later. But is the idea that he's like John, like taking them some because he really needs them for the pain, but he doesn't get full on addicted? Because like, why does he take some otherwise? And like you said, if he's not taking them at all, he would be in so much pain he couldn't operate.
Yeah.
I do like the way he manipulates her here, where he pretends like he's been sitting there the whole time, and like he really is that addicted. Like it almost feels like a spin on it if you have read the book.
Goofster, as a theater guy, I wish I could have seen the Broadway adaptation of this with Bruce Willis. And I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And then Matthew Clark, I'm Haven of Horror in the chat. I was the one that said it was terrible. He's asking me about he's asking me about the Monsters movie, and I'd answered him in the chat. I just don't think he realized it was me.
Oh.
Because I'm logged in on my Haven of Horror account.
Because John has a horror channel, which is probably where we should be doing this, but
that's where we'll do the inevitable Child's Play commentary.
Nah, if we ever do that, we'll do that here. I should have a Child's Play commentary on this channel.
Yeah.
Except I just want to skip to 2, but whatever. We'll do it.
I like 99% of the franchise.
Child's Play 2 is an improvement over the original in every single way. Like,
no, I mean 2 is the best one. It's just 3 is the only one I don't like.
Yeah, I don't care for that movie either. But it's got one of the Jimmy Olsens from Lois and Clark in it, so that's fun.
No, I mean that does have one of the funniest. Like, I can't believe you wrote this line. 'Cause, 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 'cause,
But yeah, she plays the kind of, for lack of a better word, bipolar thing really, really well, and is super convincing in the moments where she tries to be genuinely endearing. And that's why I buy that at the beginning he's not totally sure what to make of her. And it just makes her scarier because you don't know, in the moment, like which direction she's going to land. We're still on a soundstage.
So I'm not an expert, but if you put a pill in your mouth and then take it out, isn't it all still going to start dissolving?
I don't know if that's true. Maybe if you dry it off well enough, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. See, he's got to be like, oh God, how did I miss that? Now this is
it's a high hide. You got high and hide.
This is one of those typical places though where we have to make everybody else dumb to make a major character seem smarter. Because
Yeah.
the sheriff is going to be like, these other officers have no idea what they're talking about, and like, well, they're seeing all the same things you're seeing. Like, why are they so dumb? I also hate to say this because, like I said, this subplot is fun, and I do like this guy a lot. But I'll get ahead of myself again. I don't really buy, or I don't know. I don't know how you feel about this, John. I don't know if I 100% buy that he, like, somewhere in the back of his mind remembers a quote in a newspaper from years ago. Like he reads, he gets lucky that he's able to solve this crime by reading her books, or Sheldon's books about misery, because his wife is like, why are you reading all these books? And he's like, maybe something will turn up. Maybe I can, learn enough about the man that I'll figure something out. And the thing he learns is there's a quote that Annie Wilkes used, and I don't know if that's in the book, but that's smart. I like that she's so obsessed with his writing that she quotes it on the witness stand. Or is it even like after the trial? I can't remember.
That might come up, but because we never leave like Paul's point of view, uh, all of the police stuff towards the end of the book is like secondhand. They just happen to show up. You don't know why or how.
Is this typewriter the same one from The Shining?
Maybe.
I think they're both Royals, but I'm not sure.
It's been a minute since I watched The Shining. Robert Wilde, in some ways, Annie reminds me of the villain in Midnight Mass. They're just less bipolar. Yes, Cap, you gotta watch Midnight Mass.
Everybody keeps telling me that.
It's so good.
But yeah, one of the moments that kind of bugs me the most in this actually is just how passive aggressive she is with the smudging thing. Where you're like, well, what do you want him to do? Right on smudge? Like, I don't even know what you want. She's just taking the whole thing so insanely personally. That line's hilarious. You can still name the grave digger after me. One of the things that makes Sheldon in the movie so endearing is how he uses humor as a defense mechanism, and how like he keeps sneaking in sarcasm. And I like the way that builds, where the worse things get for him, the more he's kind of sneaking in little insults that she doesn't notice because she's not very nuanced and doesn't get subtext, which is why she likes the misery novels. And then you get toward the end when she's hobbled him and there's not any pretense left anymore because she knows he's been out of his room and stuff, where he just gives her the bird through a window.
Yeah, I was a little surprised how sarcastic he gets in this, because like in the book he has those moments, but then something happens that just like beats him back down. She like gets a Minnesota accent there for a minute.
Yeah, she slips into that occasionally. Um, I still like that she seems like she must have been so sheltered as a child that she can't deal with profanity, but she doesn't even know what profanity is. I still can't get over Christing. John, this is one of my favorite Christing movies. I'm just gonna start using it. I'm gonna use it so much I'm gonna make it offensive.
Somebody's got Christing amnesia.
Oh no, not amnesia.
And with the writer stuck in this though, because you've like permanently paralleled this with The Shining in my brain now. I think those will also just take place in Colorado.
Yes.
And it sticks out because, you know, the joke is everything that bad happens in Stephen King novels in Maine. Matthew Clark, what are you guys' favorite horror movies? Evil Dead 2, Hellraiser, Friday the 13th, stuff like that. Cap's favorite is Reanimator.
Yeah. No, not really. Like I said earlier, I'm not a giant horror guy, but I like this. I like Flatliners. I like although I didn't have the best viewing of that the last time I saw it, but it still has a place for me. Child's Play 2, more recently the original Halloween. But more recently I've come to really appreciate The Fly.
Yes. The Fly is great.
And I liked Candyman a lot. We watched those two movies last year, and Psycho is still a big movie for me.
Yeah, I like Candyman. I'm a big so like I said, King is my favorite author, but I'm also a big Clive Barker fan. Who that's kind of adapting. And funnily enough, I bring this up because it's a Star Trek actor. I just watched a 90s movie called Lord of Illusions with Scott Bakula in it.
Oh, interesting. I've never seen that.
And that's written and directed by Clive Barker.
Is that any good?
It's Barker is like a more out there king. He likes to go real hard into like the fantasy, dark fantasy. And that movie is that, but it's a little ahead of its time because there's some real bad CGI. And I don't really buy Scott Bakula as like the grizzled detective that deals with the supernatural.
That would almost work better 20, 30 years later, honestly.
Yeah.
Like an older Scott Bakula doing that. But yeah, I think part of the reason that I really appreciate the changes made for the movie is just that we get to watch this kind of like battle between them, where they're both manipulating each other in sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle ways.
Robert Wilde says that you like he could see you liking Exorcist 3. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
that's almost like a murder mystery, and it's got
I
one
did
of the
like
best
the first
Brad Dourif performances I've ever seen.
I did like the first Exorcist a lot. We're still just talking about other movies.
I like their banter.
I don't know if there's an intentional parallel made here at all. If so, it's a really, really broad one, but it is kind of interesting that the only like actual relationships in this movie are this really screwed up relationship with a fan that kidnaps the author she's obsessed with and an elderly married couple that gets along really well but bickers all the time.
That is interesting. This food looks really good.
Yeah, it's interesting that she has like skills. I mean, that makes her more formidable than if she just kidnapped him and was a blunt instrument, but was incompetent at everything. Although that is pretty funny that she uses spam. Because see, she looks maybe like she might be a little bit sophisticated, and then she just completely undercuts all that.
Hey, spam is underrated. It works in a pinch.
Yeah, but you can see why this guy would stick his nose up at that.
Yeah. And I will say this is a scene that's not in the book that I think really works for this the take they're going. I like this scene a lot.
Yeah, well, and it fits really nicely in the pantheon of dinner scenes about adversaries talking about things that are not what they're actually talking about.
Also, I remember those like glass ketchup bottles as a kid. I hated them because it's like impossible to get ketchup out of there after a certain point.
Yeah, why did we ever put those in glass bottles?
Yeah, especially at restaurants.
And this is kind of an obvious movie scene. Like you have seen this 100 times with the person that tries to poison someone and then they find a way to, intentionally or otherwise get around taking it, like knocking the thing over or breaking it or just not drinking it. And it's that kind of Shakespearean scene of the suspense of are they going to take the poison or not. But I think it's effective enough with this. Like, I'll admit that there are a few, like, really typical kind of movie tropes added to this to make it a mainstream movie adaptation, which is really interesting because, but I think it's handled effectively enough. It's just interesting that it's a story about a guy who's writing really commercial fiction that makes the story more commercial to sell it to an audience.
Yeah.
Like, it does do that.
That's king.
And again, I just can't help but also look at it relative to other King adaptations where it seems a little smarter than some of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because this is what, 1990?
90, yep.
So you're it's kind of in that middle point because you get some of them in the 80s that just kind of turned it into dumb horror. And then right after this, we're gonna start to get like the mini series because you got It, which isn't great, and then you got The Stand, which I like a lot, but that's its own like beast. And then the 90s also brings a lot of the like the more dramatic things that he's written to the screen. I don't know if you've seen The Green Mile, but that movie is wonderful.
Yeah, I have. I also did that on request at one point.
Oh, cool. So, Cap, don't you just hate it when you're typing and you're missing a letter? Then you have to throw the page away?
Well, if only you had somebody to fill them all in for you.
Yeah. No, and it's really annoying because in the book, he'll start just writing passages from the book that you're supposed to read, and I'm not sure if that's supposed to be relevant, but he keeps the missing letters, and I'm like,
oh,
I don't want to fill that in with my brain.
That seems almost self-indulgent to me. I forgot he did that.
Yeah.
Now you say I got far enough to see some of that. I forgot all about that. I
want to see on the all I want to see on that typewriter is all work and no play makes Paul a dull boy.
I said the same thing to Jason when he first starts writing and he really doesn't want to do it, and he writes the F word over and over again. I wanted him to get rid of that and then just write all work and no play. That would have been a nice touch. Is that going too far?
The Shining? I wasn't sure if that was something that you think he's ready for.
Yes, Jason has seen The Shining and also really liked that too.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm not sure if that would have been going too far. In the case of homage, because I'm fine within this reality. There are other King things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you. I kind of would have been okay with that if they'd had him write that.
I would have been fine with it.
That would have
I
made
don't
me laugh.
mind homaging other stuff. Like, it just depends on how you do it.
Matthew's working out with the typewriter is great. Yeah, the one thing that I think is actually kind of an editing mistake maybe is that he does it first in the montage and you don't see him go up and down with it. So in the montage it looks like he's frustrated and about to throw it. And then
I was really confused at first. I was like, what is he doing?
what is he doing? And then right after that you see him going up and down with it and I'm positive that they were just taking part of that scene and throwing it in the montage. I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But I really like that montage. Like I said, I like cutting in the sheriff reading the novel as Sheldon is being forced to write this new one, and I like the effort in doing all the costume changes to
I
give you a
like how
sense of the passage
she's
of time.
depressed that he'll want to leave. Like, there's any reality where she lets him leave.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be on her terms.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is just as you might be starting to sympathize with her a little bit, not that anything she's doing is okay, but where you're just like, oh, there's like actually a person in there, and I'm sad for her for a second, with the rain and how lonely she is, and how dictionary definition sympathetic, where she's been isolated for so long, you could see how maybe she would get. Now, she's sympathetic in the same way that Jack Torrance maybe is, and then. To go back to The Shining again, and then she pulls the gun out, and you're like, okay, nope, she's still really screwed up and scary. I have this gun. Sometimes I think about using it. That line is really interesting because I don't know if she means just through this experience or if more likely in my mind, John, she's had that gun a long time and she contemplates suicide constantly.
That's how I read it, especially if this shows that she's manic depressive.
Yep.
And like, I'm no mental health expert by any means, but typically when you say something like that and you're acting like that, this isn't a first time thing.
So yeah, this is the most movie trope thing, and even kind of more like detective TV trope thing, where he reads that line.
Those book covers crack me up because I have family members that read books that look a lot like that. Oh,
the justice higher than that of man line. Now I like that it's specifically that line because it's kind of foreshadowing, of course, suggesting that she's going to get her just desserts by the end. Oh, did you notice on your watch of this how many... We've talked over them. I wish I had remembered to mention them when they came up, but have you noticed how many times we get foreshadowing to the famous like leg hobbling scene? It's not actually hobbling in the movie. She just breaks him with the mallet. But there are 2 or 3 points where she brings up like legs in a way that is, I think, clearly setting us up for that scene later.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't notice that. I will say I went back and forth for a while because I knew about that, like the difference there, which version I liked better. And I think ultimately I do like the book version more just because it is something that's more permanent. Like he pays a price for his freedom at the end of the day. Also, it made me wince way more than the movie version did.
Yeah, and again, if you haven't read the book, I think it's real effective in the moment when you don't see it coming. But if you read that
it
first,
is very effective.
If you read that first and you knew that he was supposed to get one of his legs cut off, you'd be like, oh, maybe, oh, really, that's it. But I still think it's really visceral. The reason it was changed here is because Reiner felt like she would be even like way too unsympathetic.
I find fascinating because by that point in the book, I don't feel sorry for her.
Yeah. But I think to some degree, like to a real like sliver of a degree, you're still supposed to a little bit.
Mm-hmm. No, I can definitely see that. That's
in the
true.
movie. I'm also on the fence about it because I think it might have still played. I
She
don't
also
know.
cuts off his thumb in the book.
Yes. Although you to your argument toward the beginning of the movie, John, we might buy it a lot less if he's not addicted to painkillers. Because, like, she cuts it off and then cauterizes it with a heat gun or something, right? Or with a blowtorch?
Like
I
a
think it's a blowtorch.
blowtorch, yeah.
It goes without saying, this is also just a, like, really nice, moody kind of movie. I like all the downtime where you're just waiting for the next unfortunate thing to happen.
Yeah, it's a progression of like, what insane thing will she do next?
Yeah, and it's like writing 101 stuff with setup and payoff.
Although I do have a question when we get to the Hobbling game.
Yeah.
How does he not like wake up when she takes the knife?
I wondered that too.
Because like I'm a heavy sleeper, but somebody starts like moving my mattress, I'm gonna notice.
Well, she does stick him first, so maybe he's just that knocked out.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good
I'm pretty
or like passing by the door.
Yeah. I'm pretty
would
sure that's
not
the
be
order
able
of
to sleep.
events. That like she's gonna rush in, I think right now no, maybe it's a little bit later. And stick him with something. And then when he
I
gets
think
up
you're conflating the two scenes. She's gonna rush when the sheriff shows up. Unless I'm forgetting something.
Yeah, no, I know it's not right here, but anyway. Or is it the very next thing that happens? I think it's the very next thing that happens. Yeah, she doesn't stick him with when the sheriff shows up because I think she's already got him in the basement. Or does
No, because see, she just shows up here.
right? But that's not.
She does.
But that's
him.
not because the sheriff is showing up, is what I'm saying. And that's the
Okay.
movie. That's the VHS cover.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I
Is
also
that?
just missed that she drugged him.
Yeah, she drugs him, and then when he wakes up later, he doesn't have the knife anymore.
But no, she does rush him with the drug when the sheriff shows up, and that's when she puts it.
Oh, that's what it. Yeah, and then she takes him to the basement. And I know in the book she completely relocates him to the basement, but then she brings him back up in the.
Yeah, it's a punishment or something, and like he's terrified of rats. No, this is terrifying.
And now we drop all the pretense, but then at the end, he will attempt to bring some of it back to appease her, which is really smart.
How do you know it was twice, though?
That's a good point. See, that's another example, John, where I'm trying to decide if she did that on purpose. When she says she left her scrapbook out, why would she do that?
In the book, it is from what I
If
remember
not
of
on
the book.
purpose.
Just because that book is very wordy, and sometimes it all starts swimming around in my brain.
It is very wordy.
She implies that it's on purpose, and she punishes him even though he kind of did what she wanted.
Yeah. Where she's just looking for an excuse to do terrible things to him. Not that she really needs it, because she takes out lots of things on him that he doesn't directly do anything that it leads to.
This must have been so hard to shoot.
I would think so. He plays genuine pain really, really well.
No, his scream is... Oh, I forgot they actually showed the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of going back and forth again on which scene is more effective.
I think that's maybe the compromise that they drew, where they're like, well, this is not as violent as the book, but if we show it, it'll be really effective. And they don't even show both; they just show the one leg.
Yeah. Matthew Clark, how does she kill Sheriff in the book same way? So she doesn't kill the sheriff in the book. She kills a deputy.
Yeah, the sheriff is an invented character for this.
She gets the upper hand on him and then runs him over with a lawnmower.
With a lawnmower.
But no, you can't do that after the happening.
Well, and I want to think the main reason that wasn't in this movie, John, is because of Maximum Overdrive.
Which I still got to see.
It's hilarious.
That's what I've heard.
But is unfortunately gets kind of boring and is not as much fun in the second half.
Oh.
I did a commentary with my
Nightmare on Elm Street 6.
I did a commentary with my dad a few years ago, and my dad loves that movie, and I kind of ruined it for him, and I still feel bad about that. So I gave him Maximum Overdrive stuff for his 60th birthday this year.
Have you because then you're not a big horror guy. Have you seen Creepshow?
I gave him I have not. They put out a steelbook for the Maximum Overdrive recently. That's really pretty.
Oh, cool.
And I bought him that, and then I got him a T-shirt.
You should watch Creepshow if for nothing else. Stephen King's acting.
Oh, I forgot that he was actually in that.
Yeah, he was like really ashamed of that for a long time.
Oh, so he doesn't remember it. He just flips around and finds. That's all very lucky. This is very
yeah,
convenient.
but I mean, isn't that like half of detective work is getting lucky?
Yes, but what I'm trying to understand, I forgot about this. I thought he remembered it from earlier. So this is a little better, but what I'm trying to understand is why he wrote that line down. Like, what was significant to him in the moment in reading that book that made him take that note? And he's not writing a bunch of notes. It's the only thing he wrote down.
Well, so to be fair, he is a cop. Maybe he was involved in the case.
No, he definitely wasn't. Because you'd think it would come up that he had a vested interest in that. And again, he doesn't. I was wrong earlier. He doesn't remember it from back then. He's just like flipping through. Yeah, that's a great
he's
moment.
just like, oh, you're such a kidder.
Yeah, well, she should be
crippled him.
Also, she should be deeply offended by that because she doesn't even like the swear word Christing, which is not an actual swear word.
Because she's got Christing amnesia. That's the new thing for Smallville season 7.
Christing?
Christing amnesia.
So I'm not sure how you remedy this in the movie, John, but I think you're absolutely right that we don't get enough information about what's actually in the Misery books. And I think I do like that what we actually get about them is so insane, where you have to kind of piece it together for yourself about what they're about. And that, like, there's no place where it comes out and goes, Paul Sheldon is a writer who writes these Victorian, trashy romance novels. But but I wish somehow there was a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't totally know
So
who she is as a protagonist,
yeah,
or why,
even in
or
the
why
book, I'm not
Annie
sure of
is,
that.
or why Annie is as obsessed with her as she is.
Mhm.
I mean, she's got like a Star Trek level fandom here, to the point where she
So
named
what you're saying is you're not actually Paul, you're Annie.
uh well, not until I kidnap some actor at a convention. I'm not gonna say who.
We all know it's gonna be Patrick Stewart.
I'm just trying to think of a way to make a joke that's not gonna sound mean when I say that. Because what I was gonna say is like, yeah, I could, if I kidnap Patrick Stewart, I'm not gonna have to do very much to him before he keels over at this point. Like,
Uh, so I'm not a score guy.
see, this is why
Let's just
I wasn't gonna say that. This is why I wasn't gonna make that. It's ageist, okay? I'll admit it. I made an ageist joke.
I'm not a score guy, but the score when he's driving and then coming up to the house is really weird.
Well, again, it's really Hitchcocky. We're trying to go kind of old Hollywood with it.
Oh, Matthew Bass recently saw the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time. Yeah, that movie's awesome.
Yeah, I've never had any desire to watch that, but
You should. It's great. It's like I'm looking for this on. I'm looking for information, and she just starts rattling off the equivalent of a Wikipedia page.
no, it's great. He majored in history, and then he wrote Victorian trashy romance novels. Is
So, Cap, when are we going to get the first Geekvolution trashy Victorian romance novel? And how will it tie to superheroes?
challenge accepted?
So you said that about Terrifier, and I think you're going to regret that when we do the Terrifier 2. You should title that "How Far Can Cap Make It Before We Have to Shut It Off."
I say a lot of things. What does it get to, like a human centipede kind of place? Like,
It's very gory.
well, now I wish I hadn't said that. I didn't know anything about those. I'm
Yeah,
naive.
no, like the
I'm
appeal is
naive.
like, how messed up can we make this?
I'm naive like the sheriff. Is this a good alibi?
No. I know the kind of paper he uses to write, so I decided to try to write.
So I decided to write like him.
So Cap, who is your favorite author?
Douglas Adams.
What kind of paper does he use, and why don't you use the same kind of paper?
I don't know. I'm not sure if before he died, there's an interview where he talks about the kind of paper he wrote on.
Are you even a real fan?
I imagine Douglas Adams probably started writing in a word processor the moment such a thing was available.
Robert Wilde says Terrifier is more fun than Human Centipede. That's probably true.
I think jumping onto a bicycle with the seat missing is more fun than.
I mean that. So there's like there's like maybe 3 movies that I won't watch, and Human Centipede is one of them. And I love Terrifier. If that makes you feel better.
It's not enough to make me want to turn my mind around and go, no, you're right. Sure, let's go. Let's stick with
you
what I
accepted the challenge.
Let's stick with what I said. I can change my mind.
I don't think so.
I liked this shot a lot where he's just waiting for her to come back again.
Yeah.
And then goes across. Like, I don't know. The tension here is quite good. And I like that all he had to do is, like, not trust his instincts and come back in. Like, if he just left the house at the moment he was going to, he would have survived.
My question is, you hear somebody from the basement, why don't you pull out your gun and always have an eye behind you?
Yeah. No, that's true. But I do like, again, the false sense of security where and where now things have converged here. So we keep cutting back to him to give us some levity and a little bit of humanity in the movie. And then now he's actually in this house. And so we still have this false sense of security a little bit when we leave with him. And then he comes back in and then he dies. I like that.
Also, he was searching this house without a warrant.
Well, she let him in. I mean, I guess you're right. He did just start kind of snooping around. But, you know,
So,
he cuts
what
corners.
makes him
He's a
go
small town
back?
sheriff that doesn't have to do very much. So, you know,
Oh, here's the grill.
they cut a lot of corners. What were you saying?
No, I forgot what makes him goes back, but he hears the grill, even though I'm not sure if he'd be able to hear that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Underneath the house like that? No, probably not. You are correct, sir.
Grab your gun and keep an eye out behind you.
Yeah.
Oh, he went out with a bang.
I do like how gruesome the hole in his back looks. That's pretty good.
Yeah, and it's more effective because the whole movie isn't that.
Well, and it's double barreled, so like that's reflected in the kind of hole that's in his back. Like it looks really good. I think it's really funny that she has produced a gun, John, earlier in the movie, and when she finally kills someone, it's with a different gun.
They really play up her religious stuff in this.
More so than in the book?
A little bit. She's more just like, I want to say naive in the book. But I also might have missed something. There's also long tangents in the book where Paul just like imagines things that may or may not have happened. And I'm just like, okay. This is a 400-page book that could have maybe been 200 pages.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I never finished it, is I felt like he was making a pretty effective point with just how much of a slog it is. Like, that might sound counterintuitive, but I mean, it's just every meticulous, drawn-out detail to make you feel like you're as isolated as he is, and to manipulate the passage of time for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it is really effective, but it's tedious because it's supposed to be.
And he does all of that so much better in The Shining.
Well, and there's more going on in The Shining, so it doesn't feel as tedious.
Yeah.
You've got all this kind of, you know, extra mythology to explore and history of the hotel and all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's why I tend to like his more supernatural stuff, because he's long-winded either way, but at least in that stuff he has stuff to explore.
Yeah, well, what's weird about this as a novel is, if you think about it, this is a short story premise.
Yeah. And it's funny, to compare this to another movie that I had almost recommended was Hellraiser. That is a short story turned into a fully movie. And it's better for it.
Well, and if we can get another horror movie done for Halloween this month, Austin and I were already talking about doing Hellraiser, so we'll invite you to do that with us if we do that.
Yeah, because that's why I revoked it. Because, like, Cap and I were talking about doing that. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, I forgot. Were we talking about that? I don't remember things.
That's what he said anyway. I mentioned it, but then I told Austin that you and I were talking about doing something, and he was like, oh, me and Cap are going to do that. So I changed what I recommended.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't remember committing to you with that before.
No, you probably committed to Austin before that. That's what...
oh, okay.
That's why I changed it to like this or something else. Because when you were like, do you want to do something? I was like, yeah, well, we should do something horror. You're like, any suggestions? I was like, yeah, some of them, but I don't know if you'll like them.
I meant to mention at the beginning, doing this at all actually was John's idea, even though this is my favorite horror movie. And so I was immediately like, yeah, sure, let's do that. I like all these little details where she thinks she's really cultured, but she's just out of touch. And I like with Don Perignon. And I guess the question is she just not very well read? And that's kind of the point, that like she reads a lot, but she's not reading the things that would actually like deepen her understanding of the world? Or is it that she doesn't get out enough, or is it because of her various mental disorders? Because again, she's not completely unintelligent, but she's not refined, and kind of thinks that she is. And I think the religion thing, John, is part of that, and one of the things that makes her gravitate to the Misery novels, because they feel safe and they have the kind of moral sensibilities that she was raised with.
Well, it's astounding to me, as someone who, just out of curiosity, because that's, like I said, family members have read it, has read some of those trashy romance novels. She's fine with with those, because those get very, sex heavy,
racy, yeah.
But the F-bomb offends her.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so this is a change that I dislike. I actually dislike.
Yeah, I might be wrong about what I said with the morality of them, but I'm sure they feel really safe.
She is fine with him smoking, but like, she's a nurse and kind of self-righteous. She thinks that's disgusting and judge him for it.
And didn't you say that's what she does in the book?
Yeah. She like reluctantly agrees to let him do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the point of that change is, but it seems like because they wanted that, they made the cigarette thing part of the ritual, so she'd be okay with it because she knows that he's got this ritual. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I mean, it is the same ritual in the book. It's just her reaction is different.
Okay, interesting. So again, in the book, this is a what was the word I'm looking for? This is a decoy book, and here it's the actual book. And I think that's effective both ways.
Also, she just cursed at him.
Yeah, and I don't love that. So this whole scene gets a little too over the top for my taste.
Yeah.
Just in matching the rest of it, where now it feels like we're in the big climax of a quote unquote scary movie, John, and this is how these always play out, where they've got to be swearing at each other and saying like the most explicit words they've said in the movie so far, and there's got to be a lot of blood and eye gouging. Eye gouging is very important.
I don't mind that for her, like for him cursing and like just scrapping for survival. I don't know why she uses that kind of language all of a sudden, even in distress. Matthew Clark,
because that's what you do in these kinds of movies.
Won an Oscar for this too.
It's obligatory, John. Yes, I do.
I'm shocked she won an Oscar for this. The Oscars famously hate horror films.
Yeah, no, it's crazy that she even got nominated, much less won.
One thing that I like better in the book with this scene is like he attacks her, but she just like will not stay down, and it's kind of terrifying from his point of view. I guess they do that here a little bit too.
Yeah, but in that movie way of you thought you took care of the bad guy, but then his arm comes up out of the into the camera.
Well, now she's a slasher villain.
Exactly. That's why she has to swear like that. We're checking all the boxes at the end.
Speaking of slasher villains, Jason X is coming to 4K, and I know you're just so excited.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. Is it poetic justice that she gets hit in the face and dies because with a metal pig? Because her pig's name
No.
is Misery. And what is your read on the pig thing? Is that's in the book too, right?
Yes. I don't know. It seems like King just thought it was funny.
Well, I always thought it was just part of trying to make her like grosser and
Yeah.
just more kind of inhuman, where like her in Out of Touch, like her favorite companion is a pig, which is just odd in the first place. She doesn't have a dog or a cat or anything. She's out on a farm, she has a pig. And then she's just supposed to be like a big fat slob pig herself. Like, I think that's all it is.
Okay, so I forgot he has that line. I like that. I like that they added that this is a book he wrote for himself, which is probably for the first time.
Yes. And he could have tried to rewrite that other book, but he did this instead because it was a catharsis. And I think it's interesting that and I also kind of like that because it's the one thing that I kind of reminds you of what Stephen King was doing, where in his book, where I he gets through that whole experience and feels like he has to write a book about it, and then he sells that and it does well. Jason was like, "This woman doesn't look anything like her." I'm like, "Yeah, Jason, that's kind of the point." Like, he's just seeing her everywhere.
Hey, Cap, I'm your number one fan.
Oh no, that's scary. I don't want to hear that kind of language here, John. That's like swearing to me. But no, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting in this version because it's different in the book that, he writes a book that he's very proud of and hopes he can sell, but he doesn't have a title for it, and he can't decide what it's about yet. And then when he leaves and writes about this experience, he knows, obviously exactly what he's writing about now.
Yeah. That ending worked a little bit better with me on the second time.
Or like he's kind of he wrote that first book is kind of a way to try to find himself again, and I think the idea is supposed to be that through this kind of redemptive experience, he has finally sort of found himself again. But then the question is, what is he gonna write about after that? Because it's not like he can just keep doing, autobiographical stuff.
Mm-hmm. Misery Returns.
Yeah, does he then write that book only kind of better?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a question I have with both, like, because with the book ending, because he does keep that manuscript and publishes that big hit. Does that mean that he's now back to just stuck making misery books?
Yeah.
And he's just okay with it now, like in both versions. And in this one, I
Oh, John, you cut out, man. I can't hear you. Your mic's doing that thing it did during the Smallville commentaries again. I'm glad it waited till the end. I still can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, there he is.
Oh, cool. There we go. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I think I figured it out. I think that plug is loose, and I might have
okay.
bumped it.
Oh my God! You guys stop saying you're my number one fan. Stop it! I'm gonna have nightmares tonight. Stop it!
I'm your number one. No.
I will say this does resonate these days on a little bit of a different level. Just like doing what I do. Not that I've got like a gigantic audience or anything. Like I have had to deal with a lot less of this than obviously some much more popular YouTubers than me. Like I haven't had the swatting thing or anything. But I certainly sympathize with people that have dealt with that. Because it's not outside of the realm of possibility, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is kind of one of those timeless stories that um whichever version you're reading, you can take something away from.
Yeah, I totally get your kind of pause with both of the endings where like are they a little too ambiguous? Like what is it really saying? Cuz I had my read earlier, but you're right in that we still don't know what exactly he takes from these. Like you'd almost have a better understanding of what his arc is in total if you knew what the very next book he published was.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like
Um,
after he puts out in the book version Misery's Return, does he keep doing Misery? After he puts out an autobiographical book in this movie, what is the next thing he writes?
well, and it's interesting too because it's almost the exact opposite of the book. Because in the book, his manager like suggests, well, why don't you make your next book like about what happened? And he's like, I don't think I'm ready for that.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, he immediately goes to, I'm gonna make money off of this.
Yeah.
Uh,
And again,
but yeah,
it kind of watches like yeah, maybe my read is almost too glass half full because you're right. He might be so used to being pragmatic with his writing that he's kind of not learned anything. Like that's maybe another way to look at it.
well, Cap,
Where this is what
if
he
you were
always
captured
does.
by your number one fan and
I'm
made
sorry.
to write a book, what would you take away from that experience?
I'd go to another line of work, I think.
Would you though?
Well, I mean, there's that too. Is like painters paint, writers write, chefs cook, that kind of thing. Where like, if you went through an experience like this that was like this traumatizing and haunting, like his takeaway is, he can't get this woman's face out of his mind, but is the idea that he actually like needs her or was at least able to use her to propel his career in a different direction. Like again, with this, with the movie version, when you get to the end, he doesn't need Miser anymore. He's replaced her with Annie Wilkes, which is way worse, right? Like any way you look at it, it's not a happy ending, but it plays kind of uh, like it is until you look beneath the surface, and like both versions have that.
Mhm. There's so many layers, Cap.
Yeah, there kind of is. Like there are certainly different ways to read that, but I never really thought of the more pessimistic ending or the more pessimistic read on that ending. Like this is a guy who is always pragmatic with his writing, or at least has been to a certain point, and then he writes this manuscript that again he's proud of, but doesn't know what it's about or what it's going to be called. In the book, it's called Fast Cars. And for whatever reason, we
Yes.
decide to make it. Well, I say whatever reason. I think I'm starting to get kind of a thematic read on it. That like it's untitled because he's aimless. Like he doesn't. He's trying to find himself again. And maybe he has, or maybe he hasn't. We don't really know what's in the manuscript. Maybe it's going to depend to him on whether it's successful. Like maybe he's too defined by fame.
That's not true, Cap. We know there's a lot of F bombs in that manuscript. It's filthy, filthy.
And then he writes his way out of this situation, and he writes what the fan that has kidnapped him needs to hear to keep him alive. And then what does he do when he gets out of that situation? He writes about that experience, which he clearly, just like in the book, John is not ready to write about yet because he's still seeing her everywhere. Like any therapist would tell you, don't do that yet.
So what you're saying, Cap,
but he's
is
always
that you're going to do a
pragmatic.
rewind on this movie.
Yeah, I honestly should have done a written rewind already on this movie. But I feel like I'll just spin my wheels real hard about the ending.
No, yeah, I think if you're gonna change the ending, you need to have a definitive ending.
Although now
It's too
that I've
open-ended.
thought of that read, it does really track. I don't know if that's intended, but it does make it a different point at the end, which is appropriate because we've lost the cocaine metaphor.
Yeah, yeah, no.
So if it's
I think
about
that's
like
the only real read that like
writing
you
for
could go for with
survival,
that. It's just like he finds a new reason to write, which I think is it's a very cinematic like through line.
yeah, but I like that it's not altogether happy either. Where it's
Hmm.
like he finds a new reason, but it's also like all he knows how to do, and in his way he has to always do that to survive, which is kind of sad. Like maybe the thing he should do is go into some other kind of line of work at this point. And that speaks to the artistry of it, of like those of us that do that, we can't not do that. We don't feel right if we're not writing.
Hmm.
But anyway, I don't know. I feel like I can analyze this all day long. Thanks for watching, everybody. John, I appreciate you suggesting this and reading the whole book, so I didn't have to.
I read it, so you didn't have to. Um, but no, yeah, I'm glad we did this. Like I said, this is one been on. This is one of those movies that's like always on my list, and then I always forget about it. Just because, like I said, I like King a lot, especially his early work. Which sadly I do. This almost feels awful to say, but I do think King lost something when he got sober. Um, but no, this movie is pretty good.
It's like when the lead singer of Kansas converted to Christianity. Like the man just couldn't write anymore.
Yeah, because I mean, I think there is something to be said of like some of those ideas that come from personal struggles just make for better stories.
Yeah,
And when you lose that, you lose something. But no, neither of these would make a top five King like just stories, but this would make a top five like King adaptation. My
sure.
favorite King adaptation is probably Doctor Sleep right now, but that's just because I like Fanning a lot. Um, and it kind of gives me that shining adaptation that I've never gotten. Whereas like the movie is a good movie but a terrible adaptation, and that miniseries is a good like adaptation, but it's terrible in the ways that matter. So Doctor Sleep is kind of that happy medium, and Ian McGregor's so good.
Well, and book wise, I of the ones I've read, because there's a ton, and I've not read more
I
than
mean, he
a.
puts out like 6 books a
I
year.
know I've not read more than a handful, but Firestarter is at the tippy top for me. That's a big book for me, and
I still gotta watch the original.
and I
I saw that terrible remake.
and the original is not great either, but that book is dynamite. And then Running Man is wonderful. See, for me, King is a better sci-fi writer than he is a horror writer, and I
You
stand
gotta
by
read The
that.
Shining.
And a lot, well, I have, and it's good.
Ah,
But I like him as a science fiction writer, and he does a lot of more like classic traditional sort of science fiction stuff early on in his career that still will have a bit of a thriller bent, um,
yeah,
like
the
like
Dead Zone is like
Firestarter.
that.
Say again.
The Dead Zone is a lot like that. I don't know
I
if you know anything
I have
about that.
heard that. I've never read that. That's one of my mom's favorites. I don't know if I've told you this, John. My mom has a gigantic killer Stephen King collection with quite a few first editions, and she has an entire bookcase of nothing but King, and most of it's
It's awesome.
hardcover, and it's really pretty. I think I took a picture of it last time I was at her place. I'll send you that if I can find it.
Yeah, the Dead Zone is very Twilight Zone in its plot. I don't know if you know anything about that, but it's about a guy that like awakens from a coma and realizes he can see somebody's future by touching them.
Okay. They also ripped that off in
Um,
Smallville.
yes. And you should watch the movie because it's directed by David Cronenberg, but it also is because it's Christopher Walken.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
No,
I've
and
never done that.
USA turned that into like a procedure for a while in the early 2000s. I don't know if you remember that.
Weird, huh?
Yeah, that was on around the same time as that 4400 show that I know you liked.
Yeah, that show's great. One thing I forgot to mention that I would, and I years ago I reviewed Misery off the cuff with Eric, but I feel like I would be remiss if not in not mentioning it here, which is one of the reasons that this movie looks so good is because the director of photography is Barry Sonnenfeld, who of course went on to be a director and did the Men in Black movies and made Pushing
Okay.
Daisies and made the live action Tick pilot. So I'm a big Sonnenfeld fan. And
Is that the Amazon one, the Amazon tick, or?
no, he made the Patrick Warburton pilot.
Oh, okay.
But he is still in the Tick Brain Trust, so his name is on that. He's on the Amazon show as a producer. He's still wrapped up in all that. But anyway, I just want to mention that I like Sonnenfeld a lot, and I was shocked years after I knew who that was to see his name as the director of photography on this movie.
No, that is cool. I'm looking at. Oh, and he did Adam's Family, about the Adams Family movies.
Yeah,
I like those. I like those well enough. I haven't seen them in forever, but
he can be a little hit and miss, but the stuff I like from him, I really like from him.
hmm
He
yeah, I mean, Men in
loves
Black 2 might be
those.
one of the worst things I've ever seen.
There's so much first person perspective in this movie. Like I want to blame or give credit to Sonnenfeld for that because he does so much first person POV in the movies he directs that makes me think
Yeah,
that was probably his idea.
yeah. I wonder. 'Cause I haven't seen a lot that the director of this made, Rob Reiner, but it doesn't seem like something just based on like the rest of the movie. I don't know if that's something he would have come up with.
Yeah, I don't either. Well, anyway, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. And John, I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, and this was fun. I enjoy watching horror movies. If nobody's figured that out yet.
Yeah, and I tolerate them, and then there's those few that I really, really like.
That's why we got to start that new series, Cap Watches Horror, to see what you like and don't like.
Oh, and people were asking about favorite horror movie. I forgot to mention 28 Days Later. I would be remiss if I didn't throw a zombie movie in because I'm a closeted zombie fan.
Yeah,
So
28 Days Later is good.
I gotta get that out there.
I'm a zombie purist. I stick too much to the Romero rules. Like,
Well, that's fine.
love that movie, but it's good.
But I didn't see any of that stuff until a million years after I saw 28 Days Later. So like that was my introduction to zombie stuff.
No, that's fair, and it is a good movie.
I worked at a movie theater when I saw that. So like when I saw that movie and then people were complaining about or arguing back and forth between like the Fast and Slow Zombies thing, I had no dog in that. Like I had not watched zombie movies before that.
Yeah, and now you've seen. Yeah, you saw Dawn of the Dead because I think I requested that.
I've seen Dawn of the Dead. I've seen Night of the Living Dead. I've seen I don't remember what else, but some stuff. Anyway, I'm going to fall asleep in my chair. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you
Have
again
a
real
good night,
soon.
everybody.
I was Captain Logan. This was John. Goodbye, folks.